to maybe discuss some of the things that you saw in the film, maybe ask any questions that you might have in just a few moments. But let me tell you a little about Mid-South Transplant Foundation. We are the organ and tissue recovery agency that serves the Mid-South and the surrounding areas. And what that means is that part of our job is to work with gracious donor families. Those are the families that are losing a loved one, usually unexpectedly, and they graciously agree to donate the organs and tissues of their loved one, which we call gifts. And those gifts save many, many lives, just like Mary Jo and individuals like Walter. Okay, and that's one of the reasons that we're here today. I do want to acknowledge the film director, Rick. I thought she did a fantastic job. I mean, an excellent job. And one of the reasons we're here, I think one of the points that she did an excellent job is she really did show what difficulties families have and individuals have when an individual's on dialysis. And that's really true here. I mean, dialysis is very difficult for an individual and the family, and it takes its toll over time. And the other thing that I think the film pointed out was the true disparity between the large number of individuals waiting and the shortage of organs. And I can tell you that in this country today, there are over 120,000 individuals waiting for that life-saving organ. And today, 18 of those will die. And the reality is that film lasted about 90 minutes, and while we were sitting here, one individual died. And that's really why we're here. We're hoping that this film will spark some discussion, that you'll come and ask some questions. And honestly, we're hoping that you'll really think about saving lives when you leave this earth and you no longer need those organs and tissues. You do have that ability. And an easy way to do that is you register yourselves to be organ and tissue donors. And it takes just a few minutes to do. And you can do it by going to the midsouhtransplant.org website. There's a link to your state. It takes just a few minutes to say, I want to help someone when I no longer need my organs and tissues. You can also, every time you go to get your license renewed, you tell them, hey, I want to be an organ and tissue donor, because you're saying, I want to save lives. And we're going to make it really easy for you tonight. We've got some printed forms in the lobby that you can make that happen tonight. So if you have any questions, we're going to be around after, and we really thank you for staying. And we've got a great group of panelists that are going to be answering your questions. And we've got Dr. Santiago Vera. He is a surgeon and a transplant surgeon that's been in our community for over 30 years. He is an associate professor in the Department of Surgery at the University of Tennessee, and he saves lives for a living. And we have Verlene Carter, and she is a nurse and been in the community for almost 30 years. She used to work at the Bold Hospital if you've been in Memphis for any length of time. So she had her experience working with transplantation, and she's also worked with patients. She currently now works at Memphis University Hospital. And then, of course, we have Rick, our filmmaker. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Vera to let him make a few comments first.
Thank you for staying. I practiced organ transplantation for 30 years, and in the beginnings, the live kidney donation was very, very few, because we used to do the operation like you saw in the movie with a big scar. We had to remove one of the ribs to get access to the kidney, so it was very painful for the donors. But over the last 10 years, I was surprised that in the beginning of the movie, you show the laparoscopic techniques, but all the people were having the scars, so they may be still using the old technique.
Well, in the black market, it's a real mix, but that's what happened.
Yeah.
There's no reason for them to do it that way.
Well, the tremendous growth of live donor kidney donation in this country was because it's less painful to do in the new technique. But I grew up on the old technique, and when the change came, that was a big improvement. But the main thing that I would like to tell you guys is that for us transplant surgeons, the most important element on the equation is the donor. Because we are, by our oath, is primum non nocere. First, do no harm. And then we take healthy individuals who, by love or family, is an altruistic donation. they give their body parts on that. And then for us, the donor is the most important part. And it looks to me in what the movie depicts and then what you see on these individuals that they are taught to lie by the broker so that they can donate, so that they can get the money. So that's really a violation of that individual. And they're not the most important element of that equation. The most important element is the money. And that's what comes very clearly in the movie, and that's just not right. The second thing that was important for me to see is that for us in transplantation, the consent steps for a donor is like a 7-page document where you have to explain all the ins and outs of the procedure, and each institution in this country has to have a donor advocate who is a individually, maybe a surgeon or maybe another person knowledgeable of the medical field that sits down with the donors and tells them, you don't have to do this, to make sure that they have a back way out. And I personally, in my years of transplant, when I was counseling donors, I told them, if you don't want to do this, I will lie for you, for the donor. I will tell that you have this condition that doesn't qualify you.
Right, what you mean is, I think what you're saying is that sometimes if you get a sense that there's family pressure.
Yes, like the
So
daughter.
we talk about coercion in terms
Yeah.
of abject poverty stricken, but there's family members who feel obliged, and doctors give them I heard that from many surgeons,
Yes.
that they'll say, if you don't wanna do it, I'll take on the responsibility and say there's a medical issue, so that you, so, I mean, that's, I think, well, you
That's
go
it.
ahead.
No, that's it. The donor is the most important part, and here the donor is the least important part.
Well, here the donor is the least important part because I was depicting a black market operation. So in the black market, there are no safety nets, there's no protection, there's no guarantee they're being tested properly. If they go home, I mean, you get somebody who's a laborer and has a scar like that, and he goes home to a place where there's no running water, he can get an infection. Well, where's he gonna turn to after the infection? So by definition, the black market
Now,
is
I
bad.
noticed that it's desperation on both ends, the donor and the recipient. They all were desperate, but I didn't see any changes in the donor's living conditions. They still were poor. And they target the right people. They target the young males. They want a motorcycle, they want a house, they want a girlfriend, they want a wife, and then they have no money, and so it wasn't, nothing changed with them after they got to 2,000 or 1,600, and then they didn't give them all the money they had promised them. So it was desperation on both ends. On the higher scale, where the man was sitting on the couch, his life did not change. His wife was still wearing her CC earring and her opal. And then the man with the great big scar, life didn't change. You filmed them in the jungle, and they were still in the jungle, and they still was poor.
Well, I want to say something about that, and then we can ask questions, and we can all
Yeah, that's what
answer.
it's supposed to be.
No, it's not. You know, when it comes to saying that they're no better off, I mean, that's a complicated issue. And by the way, it's not only males. In the Philippines, it's largely male. In India, it's largely females who sell their kidneys. So it's culturally different in different countries. Here's what I found, just as the filmmaker getting into this topic and going there and filming, and how I started questioning my own ethical assumptions, the assumptions I came into making the film with. And in a way, many of them are no better off, and many of them are better off. They're better off by their own standards. The family that was basket weaving. Here was somebody who was very good with his money. He was smart. He invested. There's no guarantee that you're going to do that. But of course, no matter what, this is happening in the black market context. So, you know, it's fluke in a way that he was healthy and he was lucky. But what I was surprised to discover was I expected more, because the rhetoric in the media and in the UN reports is all about coercion, people being coerced and forced and organs being stolen. So I started looking into this issue of coercion, and now I understand. And when they talk about coercion, the UN, the prosecutor, they talk about people being coerced by their own poverty. Meaning they're poor, you offer them money, it's an offer they can't refuse. And I personally don't accept that. I don't think the black market is a good arena for this, but I don't believe because someone is poor they're incapable of making a decision. I think it's patronizing, frankly. But I have to agree with what you said. When you have a donor here, an altruistic donor, will go through a battery of tests, physical tests, to make sure they're in peak health, that they're absolutely have no, so that their health won't suffer after being a donor. They go through psychological tests to make sure they really understand what they're doing. And then they go through ethical committees to make sure that they're making the right decision for their lives. Obviously, that's not happening in the black market context.
It's fed by desperation.
It's fed by desperation on both sides. I mean, that's the other thing that struck me. I didn't dislike Raoul Fain, the guy who went overseas. He wasn't doing it lightly. He wasn't this rich Western guy who did it in a thoughtless way. And that's where the film, for me, became more interesting to make, and brought up themes that were more interesting and challenging to explore, but through all of these characters. But I think we should open it up to questions, because then you'll...
Why don't you be the moderator and designate the question?
Yeah, and I'm gonna try to bring you the microphone, and I'm gonna go back and forth a little bit, so be patient so we can hear your question.
Okay, I like the idea at the end about the government regulated thing to allow people to get, both sides to get a reasonable amount of money in the test and all that other kind of thing. What I don't understand is why there isn't more talk about having a rational donation policy. That is to, that kind of thing would help with kidneys and liver probably, but not a whole lot of other things. There's not a lot of talk about a rational donation policy where the default would be you're a donor, you'd have to sign off to not be a donor.
You're the opt-out system, right?
Well, France has a law that is presumed consent.
That's what you're talking
So they have more organs.
Well, not necessarily. Spain has the highest rate of organs per capita, and many of the countries have gone to Spain to study why, and it was by a job done by the procurement coordinators. There was a financial stimulus to the organ procurement coordinators, which are trained medical professionals who obtain consents from the deceased donors, potential deceased donors. And that seems to have been a very good, productive thing. I personally don't think that in this country, I presume consent will be a solution. I think we are running at this time a 75% consent rate nationwide on eligible donors. These are on any potential deceased individual under 70 years of age who doesn't have any medical conditions that would contraindicate. 75% of those families consent to organ donation. So that's where we got to put a focus on. And on the life donation, there is a lot of misunderstandings of the dangers and about donating a kidney and the circumstances of that. But a good educational programs for example, the University of Maryland has one of the most successful life donor programs, and they have almost tripled the volume. They do more life donor than deceased donors. In our institution, we haven't made it to half and half. We still do more deceased than live donors, but you can obtain more donors for the patients in need by these strategies. I personally don't think, maybe we'll open to discussion with the presumed consent will be a solution. I don't think it would happen in USA.
Why wouldn't it happen in the USA? You have
Freedom.
freedom of rights business
freedom,
here.
freedom. It's going to be
I'm
very
from
hard
Canada, that's why I
very
say
hard
that.
to say.
We have freedom of rights too, but the opt-outs, the presumed consent system, I don't see what the problem is. I don't. Canada doesn't have it either, and that just assumes that everyone is an organ donor. But if you don't want to be, for any reason, fear, religion, you opt out. So what it does is it eliminates all the people that procrastinate and mean to sign their register and don't register. But I do want to say something that shocked me, that even if we did have this presumed consent, there certainly wouldn't be enough kidneys to go around. But we need to sign our donor card. I keep saying sign our cards. It's registering now in Canada too. because we need other organs, and what you said, that's true. We need hearts, we need lungs, we need pancreas. So, you know, that's very important, and we still want to increase the donor pool. In the meantime, there's no traction for an incentivized system in the medical community here. We find it intuitively repulsive, and it's, you know, it raises a lot of ethical issues, though. At the World Health Organization, I mean, I spoke to a guy from the World Health Organization. He feels maybe we can start trying to get more organs from cardiac death, for example, not just brain death. And, you know, but the fact of the matter is that there's an increased demand and a decreased supply, and we're going to continue to have this problem unless we come up with a solution, or unless like bioengineering, unless we come up with a kidney in a lab, which could be.
There are other ways. There are other countries, and I won't mention, but there are other countries that restrict access to transplantation after a certain age, or you can only get one kidney in your lifetime. If you've gotten one kidney and 5 years later you reject that kidney, you won't be eligible to receive another one, to reduce that waiting list pool. And that's government mandate. We don't do that in this country. Actually, the government doesn't set up eligibility, but gives some guidelines. And each individual program writes up their criteria for eligibility for organ transplantation, which I think is very good, because you have to tailor that to the community that you live in.
Well, there's another thing, by the way. You said there's over 100,000 people waiting for organs. Well, the other thing I learned, which you would know, is that some people deteriorate on the waiting list, and then they're no longer eligible for kidneys. And I do have to say, Dr. Sunmez, the Turkish doctor, who was obviously lying to me in the film. I don't want you to think he was tricking me. I mean, I still thought he was interesting enough to meet, but he knows darn well that people are getting paid. But he said that most of the cases that he gets are extreme cases because the people who are really desperate are generally older, and they're often not eligible at home. So it's not that they can't wait, it's that they're off the list, they're too old, they have heart problems. So they are absolutely desperate, and they will do anything. And as our population gets older and the boomers get older, we're going to see an increase in kidney disease. And also kidney disease can be managed for a while. There's a point, you can manage it for sometimes 10 years before you'll be in end stage, from what I understand. So anyway, that was a long answer to that one question.
And we only have time for one more question.
Oh.
I know. Too bad I have another video film to show here in a few minutes. So I'm gonna, individual in the second row, she had her hand up originally as well.
Okay. Appreciate it.
We'll answer very shortly.
Ms. Morgan? Yes. Could you speak just a little bit more about the alternative of the idea of compensation that was proposed to the WHO that they rejected? What is that concept?
Can you hear me if I talk without a mic?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't need a mic. This is not a
But we
big.
couldn't have it for video.
But we're going to use it anyway.
It wasn't proposed to the World Health Organization. I mean, the idea floats around, but the compensation system that the people, some ethicists, some transplant surgeons, some academics have proposed here in the States, it would be different in every country, is that the same entity that what's the word, gives out the kidney, the cadaver kidneys, would monitor this, and that if I wanted to sell my kidney, I would go and they would check me up and say it's okay, she's good to do it. I'd find them. It's not a free market they're looking at, and I would sign up, and it would be anonymous, and my kidney would go to whoever's first on the list. What I also found interesting was that if you're more affluent or educated, there's a better chance that you'll find a live donor, because your family members might not be as worried about missing 3 weeks of work, because they're educated and they know that that it's not dangerous, because you have the money to register. You don't need a lot, but you need some to register in different regions of the United States to increase your chances of getting to the top of the list. So many people who are languishing actually are people who aren't affluent, and those people often don't get to the top of the list. So it wouldn't necessarily, the argument they've made, this isn't my argument, is that it's not necessarily the poor selling to the rich, it's the poor. I mean, when I say poor, I mean, and no one affluent is gonna sell their kidney. But the people who feel they need the money, but that kidney might be going to somebody who is also not necessarily affluent. So they believe it's an ethical model, that maybe the cash gets dispersed over years, maybe it's not cash, it's a mortgage. I mean, because there's no pilot program, they were just discussing potential ways to protect people from, selling their kidney and going to Vegas and blowing it all. So, that's the model, but we intuitively, and I'm sure you guys feel the same way, intuitively it feels like there's something wrong with doing that. Having said that, we sell eggs, we have surrogate mothers, we're now accepting money for bone marrow. And there's a really deep line in the sand for kidneys. And I find that interesting to explore. Money changes the transaction, but why does it change the transaction if you can control it? So, I mean, the film doesn't actually give you an answer, and I don't have an answer, but that's what that's what swirls around in my brain. It could be a win-win. I can't blame somebody who wants to live for seeking out an illegal organ. We're looking at in some states, legalizing marijuana, legalizing prostitution. We're looking at legalizing vices, safe injection houses, but when it comes to this life-saving thing, we're drawing a very, very deep line. And I'm just saying maybe conversations have to be had in the medical establishment with the kidney foundations to try something, because I feel that if I was desperate, I would do the same thing. And I think I'm an ethical person, I wouldn't take it lightly. So I feel if I would do it and those guys did it, I mean, how many people here would do it if your life or the life of a loved one really depended on it? And you had the wherewithal, right, the ability. Would you seek it out? Well, I don't think I would just sit home and go, well, I'll die, or spend 10 years of my life on dialysis. I mean, again, I know we're talking kidneys because the film focuses on kidneys, but we have no more time for more questions.
How long did it
I
take
want to
you
make a comment on that because the National Organ Transplantation Act in 1984 specifically states that no financial interaction could be associated with the transfer of organs in this country. So it would require changes of the law. And for many years, us in the transplant community, we try to put some financial incentives to the deceased donors. Like, for example, we will pay the funeral cost, and we've not been able to do that. It's the law. It's the law of the land.
And let me just end by saying that Dr. Rivera is correct that, there is an organization called the United Network for Organ Sharing that does work with all parties involved. They work with organizations like ours on the donor side. They work with the transplant centers. They work with donor families. They actually have donor families that help write policy. And you would be surprised that what they have found is that the donor families in this country don't want financial reimbursement. It is truly a gift that they're giving. And so this has been explored. I think it will continue to be explored over the years to come. What type of incentive is appropriate. But the bottom line is that everyone in this country that could be a donor was a donor, we wouldn't be having this conversation because there would not be one person that would die today waiting. So we are all we're going to move this to the lobby. We have a table and be happy to answer any more questions. And again, you do have the ability to save lives. And you have that ability to sign up and register yourselves today. So thank you so much for your time.